You spend your whole life believing you're the one steering your future. You plan. You push. You try to control every step of the way. But let me ask you something. And I want you to be brutally honest with yourself for a moment. Have you ever made a decision you couldn't explain, yet somehow it led you exactly where you needed to be? Pause here. Because that moment, that strange, almost uncomfortable clarity, is the crack in the story you've been told about reality. You think you're guiding your future. But what if it's been guiding you all along? Let me paint this for you. There were times in your life when you took a risk that made no logical sense. A phone call you felt pulled to make. A person you felt pulled to walk toward. A path you felt pulled to choose. Not because you analyzed it, not because you calculated the safest route, but because something inside you whispered, go. Trust this, move now. And only later, sometimes months, sometimes years after, you look back and think, why did I do that? Why did I feel so certain? How did that decision end up unlocking everything? You try to call it intuition, gut feeling, luck, coincidence. But deep down, somewhere in the quiet part of you, you know it was more than that. Because the timing was too perfect. The alignment was too sharp. The way things fell into place was too precise. It was as if, something or someone was coordinating it. And here's the part no one ever told you. What if the someone guiding you was you? Not the version of you sitting here right now. Not the version of you carrying yesterday's fears or last year's wounds. I'm talking about your future self, the you who has already lived the life you're trying to reach. The you who already made it, already healed, already became the person you're fighting to become. What if that version of you has been trying to get your attention? Through instincts, through synchronicities, through those coincidences that felt a little too intentional. What if your future self has been sending signals back in time, guiding you, nudging you, pulling you, not toward who you've been, but toward who you're meant to be? Sit with that for a moment. Because if this is true, then the entire way you think about time, destiny, and decision-making is about to crack open. And it leads us to one of the most mind-bending questions in quantum consciousness. If time isn't linear, can your future reach into your present and lead you before you even know where you're going? Hold that question. Don't answer it yet. Because this is where everything begins. There's something you've felt before. Something you couldn't quite name, but you knew it was real. Those moments when you suddenly know what to do, not because you reasoned your way to an answer, not because you gathered enough data, not because someone told you the right step. No, you just knew. And if you're honest, you can't explain where that knowing came from. It's almost like a memory, but from a life you haven't lived yet. Think back. Remember the times you changed direction out of nowhere and people around you thought you were being impulsive, reckless, irrational. But you felt something they didn't, a pull, a quiet certainty. A sense that if you didn't move in that exact moment, you'd miss something important, even if you didn't know what that something was. And then, once again, you look back months later and think, oh, that's why. That's why I had to go there. That's why I had to end that. That's why I had to say yes. You try to rationalize it. You call it instinct. You call it luck. You call it your subconscious, but the truth is, you've always known there was more happening underneath. because those moments don't feel random, they don't feel chaotic, they feel orchestrated, as if the universe was rearranging pieces around you to make sure you ended up in the right place at the right time with the right people. And yet, the more your frequency shifts, the more this phenomenon intensifies. Synchronicities start stacking. Opportunities show up without effort. People you need appear out of thin air. Answers arrive before the questions fully form. It's almost as if reality is responding to you faster. Not because you're forcing anything, but because something is guiding you from ahead of you. A version of you that sees the full timeline. A version of you that already knows the path. A version of you that's been trying to communicate through nudges, impulses, signs, and synchronicities. And here's the mystery. Why does this guidance appear only when your frequency rises? What exactly is sending these signals? And how does your future connect to your present in the first place? Hold on to those questions, because to answer them we need to shift from explanation to imagination. And that begins with a metaphor, one that will change the way you think about time forever. To understand how your future can guide your present, you need a metaphor, something simple but powerful enough to hold a truth most people never dare to consider. So let me give you 3. And once you see them, you won't unsee them. 1. The 2 rivers. Imagine 2 rivers starting miles apart. One is you, the version living this moment, making choices with the limited perspective you have. The other river? That's your future self, already flowing with momentum, already shaped by the versions of you that made different decisions, already heading toward the ocean of your highest potential. For most of your life, these 2 rivers feel separate. You think you're on one path and your future is some distant possibility on another. But rivers don't stay separate forever. As they move toward the ocean, their banks begin to curve. Their streams begin to echo each other. Their waters begin to feel familiar. And then, without warning, they start to merge, not all at once. Not in a dramatic collision, but in subtle currents, shifts in flow, small movements that hint. You're getting closer than you think. That's timeline merge. 2. The radio signal. Now picture an old radio. When you're slightly off the right frequency, you hear static, noise, distraction. The message is there, but scrambled. That's your life when you're out of alignment. But as you tune closer and as you shift your internal frequency, as you quiet the old identity long enough to listen, the static begins to fade, the signal sharpens, and suddenly a voice comes through, clear, calm, confident. It sounds like intuition, it feels like guidance. But what if the voice you're hearing is your future self broadcasting from a timeline where everything finally makes sense? The more aligned you become, the clearer the transmission. 3. The GPS that updates in real time. Think of your life like a GPS. You never see the entire map at once. You only see the next turn, the next step, the next small adjustment. But the GPS sees the whole route. It knows where you're headed long before you do. Your future self works the same way. It doesn't overwhelm you with the full picture because you're not ready for it. Instead, it gives you tiny adjustments. Turn left here. Say yes to this. Walk away from that. Trust this detour. And only later, as life unfolds, you realize the path was always being guided, not from behind you, but from ahead of you. These metaphors aren't poetic decoration. They're models, clues, glimpses into how the timeline merge actually feels. Because when your present flows toward your future also flows toward you. And the moment the two currents meet, everything changes. You've spent most of your life believing a story so familiar, so repeated, so deeply ingrained that you never thought to question it. The story says your future is ahead of you, that you must chase it, work toward it, earn it, struggle for it. The story says time is linear. You start here, you move forward, and if you're lucky, you reach the life you want. But what if that story is incomplete? What if it's not wrong? Just too small? Because in the quantum model of reality, the future is not a distant destination. It's not a finish line waiting for you to cross it years from now. It's not some far-off version of you hoping you eventually catch up. Your future is a field, a living, active, dynamic field of information that already exists. It's not waiting, it's broadcasting. You don't travel to your future, you tune into it. And the moment you understand this, the old paradigm collapses. You suddenly see that your future isn't something you move toward in a straight line. It's something you draw closer by adjusting the frequency of who you are right now. You've been told to push harder, to hustle, to force your way into the life you want. But what if the reason your progress has felt slow isn't because you're not working enough, but because you've been operating under the wrong idea of how reality works? Think about this. Every version of you already exists as a pattern in the quantum field. The confident you, the healed you, the abundant you, the fulfilled you. These versions aren't imaginary or symbolic. They're informational blueprints with real energetic signatures. And each one has its own gravitational pull. When you align with the frequency of a specific version of yourself, you don't force your way into that future. You're pulled into it. You're drawn in by resonance, not effort. That's why sometimes you achieve more in a single instinctive decision than in years of grinding. That's why sometimes one shift in identity changes everything faster than all the strategies you've ever tried. Because you don't move toward your future in the way you've been taught. You reduce the distance between your current frequency and the frequency of the life waiting for you. And when the frequencies match, the merge begins. Your actions start feeling guided. Opportunities start appearing without friction. Your timeline starts bending toward the version of you that already knows where you're going. This is the moment where the old paradigm dissolves. Where chasing stops, where forcing stops, where struggling stops. Because your future isn't something you pursue, it's something you meet halfway. It's something that moves toward you the moment you align with it. And once you feel that shift, nothing about your old way of living ever makes sense again. To understand why your future self can guide your present, you have to step into a different way of seeing reality. Not a mystical belief, not a metaphor, a different physics. In the quantum view, your life isn't a single timeline stretching in one direction. It's a field of possibilities. Layers of potential paths all existing as information at the same time. Each path is a pattern. Each future is a pattern. Each version of you is a pattern. And these patterns aren't waiting in silence. They're vibrating, broadcasting, resonating with distinct frequencies just like radio channels. Your future self isn't a fantasy or a mental image. It's an informational identity already alive inside this field. a blueprint of thoughts, emotions, behaviors, choices, and outcomes that all carry a measurable energetic signature. And here's the part that changes everything. The moment your internal frequency begins to match the pattern of a specific future, the two timelines start to converge. Not logically, not linearly, but vibrationally. This is coherence. Imagine two tuning forks across a room. Strike one and the other begins to vibrate even though you never touched it. This phenomenon is called sympathetic resonance. Your future self is the second tuning fork. When your thoughts, emotions, and identity shift toward that future, you create a vibrational match, and the match creates a bridge, and the bridge creates a flow of information. This is why you sometimes receive guidance without knowing where it came from. It's the interference pattern, an overlap between two versions of you simultaneously existing in the field. Quantum physics calls this retrocausality, a phenomenon where future events influence present behavior. Not metaphorically, literally. You feel it as intuition. You experience it as synchronicity. You notice it as strange clarity or unexpected alignment. But underneath, it's coherent information crossing timelines. Think of your identity as a vector, a direction in consciousness. Your current self has a vector. Your future self has another. When these vectors draw closer, even slightly, your thoughts begin shifting. Your preferences change. Your emotional responses evolve. Your sense of direction sharpens. You're not suddenly smarter. You're simply receiving data from a version of you that already knows the way. Timeline merge is the collapse of two identity vectors into coherence. The moment your life stops feeling like a struggle upward and starts feeling like momentum forward. This is why when you're aligned with a powerful future, your decisions begin to feel effortless. Not because life magically becomes easy, but because you're no longer relying on the limited viewpoint of your past. You're being guided by the intelligence of who you're becoming. Imagine that for a moment. You're not alone in the journey. Your future self is already out there, shaping your path, sending signals, creating openings, repositioning pieces like a chess grandmaster. You're not waiting on your future is reaching for you, and the more coherent you become, the stronger the pull. The clearer the signals, the faster the merge. This isn't wishful thinking, it's quantum logic. The mathematics of information fields, the physics of consciousness. And once you understand this, you'll never again look at intuition or lucky timing the same way. Because deep down you'll know it wasn't luck, it was you. Just from the timeline ahead. Now let's bring this down from the quantum field into something you can actually feel inside your own body. Because when a timeline merge begins, it doesn't just shift your energy, it reshapes your nervous system. Your brain, this remarkable electrical vibrating network, responds to the future before your conscious mind does. And the first thing that changes is your survival system. You start spending less time in fight or flight. The constant background noise of anxiety, pressure, and overthinking begins to quiet. Not because life becomes easier, but because you're no longer operating from the identity that sees everything as a threat. Your amygdala relaxes, your breath deepens, your internal pace slows down. This is the first sign that your future self is getting closer. A calm you can't explain. A sense of stability you didn't earn through logic or effort. A softness that feels strangely new. but also strangely familiar, because your nervous system is tuning to a different frequency, the frequency of the version of you who isn't in survival anymore. Then something even more interesting happens. Your brain begins processing information differently. The logical, analytical pathways that used to dominate you take a step back, and the intuitive, high-speed, integrative pathways start taking the lead. You shift into alpha, then into theta, the brainwave states associated with insight, creativity, pattern recognition, and communication with nonlinear information. This is why, during a merge, you often feel a sudden clarity you can't justify. You just know things. You anticipate outcomes without needing evidence. You sense opportunities before they fully form. Your brain is literally accessing data from the future blueprint. It's not mystical. It's neurological. Another layer appears too, what neuroscientists call predictive coding. Your brain is always trying to predict what comes next based on past experiences. But when a timeline merge begins, that entire prediction model starts to rewrite itself. Your system no longer expects the past to repeat. It begins expecting the future to unfold, and that shift changes everything. You stop reacting from old wounds. You stop making decisions from old fears. Your nervous system stops defending the identity you used to be and starts preparing for the identity you're becoming. This is why your choices feel lighter, why your boundaries sharpen, why your desires clarify, why your actions suddenly align with the version of you who already made it. Your brain isn't being pulled backward anymore, it's being reorganized forward, future first, not past-driven. And when that happens, you don't just think differently, you feel differently, you exist differently. That's the neurobiology of a timeline starting to merge. And once it begins, the shift reaches deeper, into the part of you that isn't just mind or body, but the place people call the soul. If the quantum field explains how your future connects to you, and the nervous system explains where you feel it, then the spiritual layer explains why it matters. Because at the deepest level, your future self isn't just a possibility, it isn't a psychological fantasy or a motivational ideal. It's a larger expression of your consciousness, the version of you who already stepped into expansion, clarity, wisdom, and alignment. It's the you who remembers who you really are. You felt this presence before, even if you didn't have words for it. In moments when life felt unbearable, in moments when you didn't know how to keep going, in moments when you whispered a silent, breaking question, "What do I do now?" And somehow, some way, you found the strength to take one more step. Where do you think that strength came from? Most people believe guidance comes from above, from something external, from something other. But what if the guidance you've always felt didn't come from outside you, but from beyond you? From the part of your soul that already walked through the fire and came out whole. From the version of you that already lived the timeline you're trying so hard to reach. This is why, on a spiritual level, a timeline merge feels so strangely intimate. It doesn't feel like being pushed. It feels like being remembered. It feels like, I know this. I've been here before. This feels like home. That's because spiritually it is home. You're not becoming someone new. You're returning to someone you've always been. When the merge deepens, you start experiencing guidance differently. It stops feeling like intuition and starts feeling like memory from a life your body hasn't lived yet, but your soul already has. Your decisions feel guided by a knowing that doesn't argue or debate. It simply calls you forward, not with pressure, not with fear, not with urgency, but with resonance. Your future self doesn't yell, it doesn't force, it doesn't demand, it whispers, it nudges, it pulls. It opens doors with timing so precise you'd think the universe rehearsed it. And maybe it did. Because your future self isn't separate from the universe. It's an extension of it. A voice inside the field of consciousness that already holds the outcome of your becoming. This is why timeline merge is not just a psychological shift. It's a spiritual reunion, a remembering, a returning, a realignment with the timeline where your soul is already free. And once you feel that presence walking with you, you'll never again believe you're navigating your life alone. By the time the merge reaches the spiritual layer, something unusual begins to happen around you. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. It starts with a feeling, then it becomes a pattern, and eventually it becomes a language your future self uses to speak to you. These are the moments you can't explain to anyone else because they don't make sense on paper. But they make perfect sense in your body. The first sign is synchronicity. Not the cute kind you read in books, but the kind that lands with precision so sharp it almost feels scripted. You think of someone, and they text you. You ask a question, and the answer appears within hours. You set an intention, and the world rearranges itself around it, and you know, deep down, this isn't coincidence anymore. This is communication. Then comes the second sign. Your intuition becomes unnervingly accurate. Not vague feelings, not soft impressions, but crystal clarity. You make decisions that feel 5 steps ahead, as if you're responding not to the present, but to a future that already unfolded. The third sign is the strange return of déjà vu. Moments that feel like echoes, scenes that feel familiar, conversations that feel rehearsed. You're not reliving the past, you're brushing against a timeline you're moving toward. The fourth sign is alignment without effort. Opportunities don't trickle in. They arrive. People show up at the exact moment you need them. Situations unlock before you even knock. You start noticing a rhythm to life that feels intelligent. And then there's the fifth sign, the one most people ignore. Things that once felt heavy suddenly fall away. Old patterns collapse. Old identities stop fitting. Old cycles dissolve faster than you can make sense of them. It's not destruction, it's recalibration. It's your timeline shedding everything that doesn't match where you're going. These signs aren't random, they're invitations, clues, markers that something bigger is moving in your life. But here's the twist. These signs aren't the merge itself, they're just the openings. Because what's coming next is the realization that your future self doesn't guide you through force, but through alignment. And once you understand that insight, the entire way you move through reality begins to change. There's a moment in every timeline merge when something inside you finally clicks. Not because you learned something new, but because you remembered something true. The truth is this: your future self doesn't lead you with pressure. It leads you with alignment. It doesn't push you. It doesn't chase you. It doesn't drag you toward a life you're not ready for. It waits for you to match its frequency. This is why you can't force change, no matter how badly you want it. This is why hustling, grinding, and overthinking never get you where you want to be. Because those states belong to the version of you that's trying to survive, not the version of you that's ready to evolve. Your future self sends signals, not demands. Pull, not push. Resonance, not resistance. You feel it every time something just clicks. Every time a decision feels strangely obvious. Every time a door opens without you forcing it. Every time you take a step that feels guided rather than calculated. Guidance from the future never shows up as fear. Fear is the voice of your past. Guidance shows up as clarity so gentle that most people miss it. The merge begins the moment you stop fighting who you used to be and start listening to who you're becoming. Because your future self isn't trying to change you. It's trying to align you. Imagine this for a second. A version of you who already broke free from the patterns you're still tangled in. A version who already knows which relationships drain you, which habits hold you back, which choices unlock your highest reality. That version is not trying to shout over your life. It's simply radiating a frequency that you can either resist or tune into. And the more you quiet the noise of the old identity, the easier it becomes to hear the signal. You begin acting differently without trying. You start choosing differently without forcing. You stop negotiating for the life you want and start embodying the person who already has it. This is the heart of the merge, not effort, but allowance, not striving, but aligning, not pushing forward, but being pulled upward. Your future self doesn't lead with force. It leads with resonance. It draws you toward the timeline that is already yours. And once you feel that pull, once you experience that unmistakable sense of this is the way, your reality begins to shift faster than your mind can comprehend. Because now, you're not moving alone. You're moving with the intelligence of the person you're becoming, and that changes everything. Up to this point, everything has been about understanding the merge. Now it's time for you to feel it, to live it, to turn theory into movement. Because a timeline merge isn't an idea you admire, it's an identity you step into. And the shift begins the moment you stop asking, how do I get to my future? And start asking, how do I match the version of me who's already there? There are 4 practices that accelerate this transition. Not complex rituals, not overwhelming routines, just simple shifts that open the doorway for your future self to step closer. Let's walk through them. The first practice is embodiment, future self-embodiment. Instead of imagining who you want to become someday, you begin borrowing micro moments from that version today. Not pretending, not faking it. Just sampling the energy. You sit the way they sit. You speak the way they speak. You breathe the way they breathe. You make one decision a day as if that future you were already in charge. It's not about changing everything at once. It's about changing your posture toward life just enough for the field to notice, and it always notices. The second practice is tuning. Timeline attunement. This is where you stop overthinking your next move and start sensing it. Instead of asking, what should I do, you ask, what feels aligned? What feels light? What feels like the path with a pull? Your future self never communicates through pressure. It communicates through a subtle magnetic yes, a pull deeper than logic. A direction that feels both unfamiliar and absolutely right. When you follow that pull, you're not guessing, you're decoding. The third practice is tracking, synchronicity tracking. Noticing signs isn't about being spiritual, it's about being aware. Synchronicities are not cute coincidences, they're informational breadcrumbs. Each one points to a frequency match. Each one marks progress toward the merge. Write them down, every signal, every alignment, every strange moment that feels too precise to ignore. Patterns will emerge, not random patterns. Patterns showing the language your future self uses to communicate with you. Most people experience these signs but never build a relationship with them. You will. The fourth practice is yielding. Identity yielding. This is where things get real. Because every timeline requires a different identity. You can't enter the future with the emotional habits of the past. Yielding doesn't mean giving up. It means releasing the versions of you that were built for survival, not expansion. You stop negotiating with old limitations. You stop shrinking to fit outdated expectations. You stop carrying stories that no longer belong to the person you're becoming. You create space, and your future self fills it. Some days that will feel like liberation. Other days it might feel like you're shedding a skin. But every version you release brings you closer to the timeline that's been calling you. These practices aren't about becoming someone new. They're about remembering someone true. They're about tuning into the version of you that already exists in the field, the version that's been guiding you long before you had language for it. When you embody, when you attune, when you track, when you yield. The merge accelerates. Life feels less like a staircase you climb and more like a river you join. Decisions become clearer. Opportunities become closer. Your future becomes louder. And the deeper you move into this alignment, the more you realize something profound. Your future isn't waiting for you to arrive. It's waiting for you to match. There comes a moment in every transformation when everything suddenly feels quieter. Not empty, not hollow, just quiet in a way that feels almost sacred. It's the moment you realize you're no longer straining toward your future, because you can finally feel it walking toward you. You sense it in the pauses between your thoughts. You feel it in the calm that settles behind your ribs. You notice it in the way life begins to open softly, steadily, without force. It's subtle. So subtle most people miss it. But you won't. Because now you know what the merge feels like. It's not fireworks or grand revelations. It's the unmistakable awareness that something larger than your old self has entered the room. The version of you you've been trying to reach is no longer distant, no longer theoretical, no longer a someday. It's here. Touching your choices, shaping your instincts, breathing through your decisions. You don't have to chase anything anymore. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to earn your way into a future that was already written with your name on it. All you have to do is allow. Because you don't step into your future. You open yourself so your future can step into you. And once you feel that presence, once you recognize that the intelligence guiding you has always been your own, a quiet confidence settles inside you. A knowing, a sense that you're not moving alone and you never were. You're walking with the version of you who already made it home. And the merge has only just begun. By now you can feel it. Something inside you has shifted, something quiet, but undeniable. You're not trying to become your future self anymore. You're beginning to merge with them, and that changes more than just your decisions. It starts changing your history. Because once the merge deepens, something strange happens. Your past doesn't feel the same. Old patterns lose their grip. Old memories lose their meaning. Old wounds lose their authority. It's as if the version of you who has already healed begins rewriting the version of you who hadn't yet. You start seeing your past through different eyes, not with pain, not with regret, but with the clarity of someone who finally understands why everything had to happen the way it did. And this leads us into the next chapter, one most people never see coming. If your future can guide your present, then what else can it reshape? What else can it transform? What else can it rewrite? The next part of your journey is called the identity overwrite, how your future self rewrites your past patterns. Because the real magic of a timeline merge isn't that your future pulls you forward, it's that it begins to edit everything behind you. Your story, your beliefs, your identity. And once you understand that, your entire reality starts bending in ways that feel impossible, until they become inevitable. I'll meet you in the next video. You're ready for it.